You are still employed, aren't you? That is more than some people can say." Those words came out of Dwight Miller's mouth like he was conferring a grand favor upon me, like I should fall to my knees in humble gratitude. I stood in his corner office on the fourth floor of Apex Heavy Manufacturing, clutching my mug of lukewarm coffee, striving to keep my breathing steady and my posture rigid. I was doing everything in my power not to let him see that my entire professional world had just been torn to shreds. Sitting in the plush leather executive chair behind Dwight's expansive mahogany desk, the exact chair explicitly promised to me 6 months prior, was 23-year-old Gage. He had his designer leather sneakers propped up on the edge of the desk, slouched back while carelessly scrolling through his smartphone, likely texting his college friends about his newly acquired corporate title. 6 months ago, I had sat in that exact office holding a formal offer letter from Vance Logistics, a premier regional competitor. They offered me $40,000 more per year, a director-level title and stock options. When I showed the offer to Dwight out of professional courtesy, he did not hesitate. He looked me straight in the eyes and gave me his solemn word. He told me he was being elevated to executive vice president in 6 months, and his senior operations director role would automatically become mine. He said he needed someone who actually understood our international logistics, customs compliance, and client negotiations to keep the division from collapsing. I believed him. I dedicated 15 years of my life to Apex Heavy Manufacturing. I started at age 22, working my way up from an entry-level inventory coordinator to senior operations manager through sheer grit, 70-hour work weeks, and an unwavering commitment to operational excellence. So that afternoon, I called the recruiter at Vance Logistics. I told them I was staying. I listened to the sharp sigh of disappointment on the line before hearing the heavy click of that opportunity closing forever. I closed that door because I believed 15 years of loyal service, hundreds of solved crises, and countless saved contracts meant something. I thought integrity was a two-way street, yet here was Dwight, standing beside his smirking nephew, casually informing me that corporate business needs had shifted. He told me Gage brought fresh perspectives to senior leadership, while I was simply too valuable in my current hands-on operational role to be moved. How was I supposed to react? How does a senior professional fight a blatant act of nepotistic betrayal after sacrificing a life-changing career opportunity? And why did loyalty suddenly feel like the most foolish belief I had ever clung to? Before I go any further into what unfolded, I want to sincerely thank you for being here today and listening to my story. If this account resonates with your own experiences, if you have ever felt invisible, exploited, or had a life-changing promise ripped away, please take a moment to click that like button and leave your thoughts in the comments. Please consider subscribing to the channel to hear exactly how this high-stakes situation concluded, because what happened next caught everyone completely off guard. Neither Dwight nor Gage nor upper corporate executive leadership ever saw it coming. My name is Grant Vance. I am 47 years old, unmarried, with no children or immediate family in the region. I am the quintessential corporate operational anchor, the guy who arrives at the facility at 6 in the morning, leaves long after the sun sets, remembers every staff member's family details, and quietly neutralizes multi-million-dollar operational disasters before executive management even senses a problem. Apex Heavy Manufacturing designs and fabricates heavy industrial gearboxes and specialized hydraulic drive components. It is not a glamorous industry, but it is vital. Major global infrastructure projects, mining operations, and commercial shipping fleets across North America, Europe, and Asia rely entirely on our precision machinery. If our deliveries are delayed or fail compliance standards, entire industrial projects grind to a halt, triggering crippling liquidated damages penalties. During my early years at the firm, I recognized a fundamental truth. The real engine of international commerce does not run on corporate organizational charts or slide deck presentations. It runs on an invisible, delicate network of interpersonal trust built between quiet line operators, regulatory officials, cultural specialists, and veteran field consultants. Over 15 years, I had painstakingly cultivated three foundational pillars of external operational support that kept Apex Heavy Manufacturing running while rivals faltered. The first of these pillars was a formidable woman named Nadia, the senior chief customs compliance auditor at our primary international port of entry. Port clearance is a nightmare of red tape, federal maritime documentation, and strict international shipping standards. A minor paperwork discrepancy or misclassified tariff code can cause a cargo ship carrying $20 million worth of heavy gearboxes to sit idle at the harbor for weeks, accumulating thousands of dollars per day in demurrage fees. While furious clients threatened breach of contract lawsuits, Nadia was ruthless with inexperienced shipping clerks, but she valued honesty, precision, and respect above all else. 12 years ago, when a junior warehouse manager mislabeled an entire shipment of forged steel casings, I did not attempt to hide the error or bribe a clerk. I drove straight to the Port Authority office, presented corrected documentation in person, apologized for the oversight, and worked alongside her team until midnight to reinspect the crates. From that day forward, Nadia trusted my word implicitly. Whenever our containers arrived, her department processed our clearance forms with remarkable efficiency because she knew Grant Vance never submitted fraudulent or sloppy paperwork. Over the years, our professional relationship grew into genuine mutual respect. I learned that Nadia was a single mother whose eldest daughter, Tanya, was pursuing a degree in international trade law and logistics compliance. I remembered to inquire about Tanya's academic milestones, sent thoughtful congratulatory notes upon her graduation, and offered practical industry insights whenever she asked for advice. It was not a calculated transaction. It truly cared about their well-being. The second pillar was Sabine, an elite independent cultural consultant and linguistic negotiator specializing in European and Asian commercial contracts. In heavy machinery exports, technical translation is only 10% of the battle. 90% lies in subtle cultural nuances, nonverbal cues, and indirect negotiation tactics. A direct refusal or an aggressive legal phrase can instantly destroy a multi-million-dollar partnership with overseas buyers. Sabine was a master of her craft, but corporate executives frequently treated her like a human translation machine, demanding complex document turnarounds on impossible 2-hour deadlines. I treated her like the high-level strategic asset she was. I provided her with comprehensive technical context 3 days before major international video conferences, sought her advice on cultural negotiation protocols, and ensured her invoices were processed and paid within 48 hours without administrative friction. In return, Sabine gave Apex Heavy Manufacturing her absolute loyalty, guiding us through treacherous overseas negotiations that saved numerous high-value partnerships. The third pillar was Norman, a 71-year-old legendary industry expert who had consulted for global mining conglomerates for over 4 decades. Norman was the ultimate technical authority in heavy drive systems. He consulted directly for 5 of the largest equipment buyers in North America. Corporate executives across the continent courted Norman constantly, but he trusted exactly one person at Apex to give him transparent, unvarnished facts: me. I never lied to Norman about production schedules, metallurgy testing results, or component lead times. If a casting had a minor structural anomaly that required reforging, I told him immediately, even when it put immense pressure on our internal department. Norman respected uncompromising honesty above all else. His endorsement alone brought tens of millions of dollars in annual purchase orders to Apex Heavy Manufacturing. Dwight Miller was fully aware of the immense value these 3 individuals brought to our division. He had watched me leverage these relationships to rescue the company from catastrophic supply chain failures at least 4 times over the past 3 years alone. 2 years ago, a sudden shift in international maritime customs regulations threatened to freeze 3 vessel shipments of drive assemblies bound for an open-pit mining client in South America. The contractual penalty for late delivery was $2 million, alongside an immediate cancellation clause. While Dwight panicked in his office, I spent 72 continuous hours coordinating between Nadia at the Port Authority, Sabine handling urgent legal clarifications with international shipping agents, and Norman reassuring the buyer's executive board. The shipment cleared customs with 4 hours to spare. At the quarterly celebration dinner, Dwight clapped me on the shoulder in front of the entire division and declared, "Grant is the immovable spine of this entire operation." I felt a deep sense of pride that night, falsely believing that my dedication was recognized and would be rewarded accordingly. Then came the day Dwight introduced his nephew to the division. "This is Gage," Dwight announced with a booming voice during our Monday morning briefing. "He just graduated with a general business degree, and he is joining our operational leadership team. He brings fresh corporate strategies. I expect everyone to support him fully." Gage was 23 years old, wearing an ill-fitting designer suit, an expensive gold watch, and an arrogant grin. When he reached my desk, he did not shake my hand. He merely gave me a brief nod and said, "My uncle mentions you do a lot of the heavy lifting around here. Show me where the main files are kept." A cold knot twisted in my stomach, but I forced myself to maintain professional composure. I spent the next 2 weeks patiently training Gage. I walked him through our enterprise resource planning software, explained our customs documentation protocols, and introduced him to our core operational workflows. Gage spent most of those sessions staring at his phone, interrupting technical explanations to ask about executive bonus structures, company car allowances, and work-from-home privileges. 15 days later, Dwight called an all-hands department meeting. Everyone gathered in the central conference room, expecting the long-awaited announcement of my promotion to Senior Operations Director. "As you all know, I am moving up to Executive Vice President of Operations," Dwight announced proudly. "It has been a privilege leading this team, and I am thrilled to announce that Gage will be stepping directly into my former role as Senior Operations Director." A suffocating silence descended upon the conference room. A junior logistics clerk accidentally dropped a folder, and the paper hit the floor with a sound like a gunshot. Nobody looked at me. Nobody dared to make eye contact. I sat frozen in my chair, feeling as though the air had been violently sucked from my lungs. After the meeting dispersed, I walked into Dwight's office, my voice deliberately quiet, steady, and measured despite the storm raging inside my chest. "You gave me your personal word 6 months ago, Dwight," I said. "I turned down a $40,000 annual raise and a director role at Advanced Logistics because you explicitly promised me this position." Dwight shrugged his shoulders casually, picking up a pen and examining it as if my career was a minor detail. "Business needs evolve, Grant. Gage represents the new generation of leadership. Besides, you are far too valuable in your current operational role. If I move you up, who is going to handle the daily fires? Why disrupt a system that works? I gave up a life-changing career move because of your promise," I stated, staring directly into his eyes. "And you are still employed at a great company, aren't you?" Dwight replied with a dismissive chuckle. "That is more than a lot of people in this economy can say. Plans change, Grant. Get back to work." He turned his back on me, opening his laptop to indicate the conversation was officially over. I stood there in the silent doorway for 5 long seconds. I did not raise my voice. I did not slam the door. I did not throw a dramatic tantrum or threaten to resign on the spot. Instead, I paused and inhaled deeply, regaining absolute inner composure. I walked back to my desk, sat down quietly, and realized with crystal clarity that my 15 years of blind loyalty were officially at an end. It was time to shift from emotion to cold, precise, strategic execution. The first thing I did that evening was conduct a thorough, meticulous review of my employment history, personnel files, and original onboarding documents. I pulled up the employee handbook and my signed employment agreement from 15 years ago. Because Dwight had deliberately kept me in a mid-level manager classification to avoid paying me senior executive compensation, I had never been required to sign a non-compete covenant, a non-solicitation agreement, or a restrictive executive employment contract. Under state employment law and corporate jurisprudence, my technical know-how, professional relationships, and general industry expertise were legally mine to retain. I had zero obligation to share my personal network or perform duties outside my formal, written job description. Meanwhile, Gage's tenure as Senior Operations Director began with immediate incompetence. On his second day in the position, Gage attempted to handle an urgent inquiry from our largest European buyer, a German industrial conglomerate that accounted for 30% of our international revenue. Impatient with formal protocol, Gage sent a blunt, aggressively worded email demanding they sign an unvetted contract amendment without waiting for technical review. The German executive board was deeply offended by his arrogance and crude communication style. Immediately issuing a formal notice of contract suspension, Dwight rushed to my desk in a visible panic. "Grant, you need to fix this right now. Draft an apology and smooth things over with their board." I looked up at Dwight calmly. I drafted a polished, highly professional formal apology, carefully framing the incident as an administrative misunderstanding during a leadership transition. Because the European executives had worked with me for over a decade and trusted my personal integrity, they accepted the explanation and rescinded the contract suspension. During Gage's second week, a critical vessel containing 14 industrial gearboxes arrived at the port. Instead of submitting standard customs documentation through Nadia's established compliance portal, Gage decided to show off his newly granted authority. He called the Port Authority main office, reached a junior clerk, and angrily demanded that our containers bypass standard inspection protocols because Apex Heavy Manufacturing was a major regional corporation. Nadia was furious. She immediately placed a complete administrative hold on all Apex containers entering or exiting the terminal. Demurrage fees began accumulating at $5,000 per day, and our shipping lines faced total gridlock. Dwight appeared at my cubicle again, sweating through his dress shirt. "Grant, the port has frozen our entire shipment. Call your port contacts and get those containers moving immediately." I picked up the phone, called Nadia on her direct line, apologized profusely for Gage's disgraceful conduct, and assured her that proper documentation would be submitted under my direct supervision. Nadia accepted my personal apology out of respect for our 12-year relationship, but she delivered a stern warning. "Grant, for you, I will release this shipment. But if that arrogant child calls my office again, your company will face a full regulatory audit." The shipment cleared, saving the firm tens of thousands of dollars in fines. By the third week, Gage attempted to bypass Sabine's translation services during a delicate contract renewal with an East Asian industrial supplier, using an automated translation software program to generate legal terms. The automated tool completely butchered technical metallurgic specifications, creating a massive dispute over raw material quality standards. Once again, Dwight ordered me to step in and fix the mess. Once again, I contacted Sabine, spent hours smoothing over the rift, and restored the supply contract. After each disaster I resolved, Dwight would smile patronizingly and say, "See, Grant, this is exactly why you belong in your current position. You are the engine of this place. You are simply too valuable to promote." It was a classic corporate trap. They had demoted my authority while retaining my workload, using my 15 years of hard-won expertise as a safety net while Gage collected a six-figure director salary, driving a company-issued luxury sedan and taking credit for my quiet rescues. That Friday evening, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the cityscape outside my window. I possessed three choices. Option 1, I could quit immediately in anger, leaving myself without an income or leverage while Dwight and Gage found someone else to exploit. Option 2, I could remain in my role indefinitely, continuing to act as the silent safety net for an incompetent manager while sacrificing my health and self-respect. Option 3, I could execute a quiet, perfectly legal, and devastating strategic pivot. I opened my personal laptop. I did not access Apex company databases, proprietary software, or internal files. Instead, I pulled up my personal address book, a network of personal relationships built over 15 years of genuine human connection. I drafted 3 short, elegant, professional messages. Moshe 1 was addressed to Tanya, Nadia's brilliant daughter. I knew that Tanya had recently passed her customs broker licensing exam and was establishing her own independent trade compliance consultancy firm. "Dear Tanya," I wrote, "I noticed you recently launched your independent customs consulting firm. I would love to meet for coffee this Friday to share some strategic insights regarding client relationship management and regulatory navigation in heavy industrial manufacturing. Manufacturing." Mace 2 was addressed to Sabine. Dear Sabine, I wrote. You mentioned several months ago that you were expanding your independent linguistic and cultural advisory services for international trade. I would welcome the opportunity to join you for lunch next Tuesday to discuss market trends and communication strategies for global heavy equipment suppliers. Mace 3 was sent to Norman, the veteran industry consultant. Dear Norman, I wrote, I have always deeply valued your professional mentorship. I would be honored to treat you to dinner next Wednesday evening to gain your perspective on broader career transitions and strategic supply chain dynamics in our industry. Within 45 minutes, all three replied enthusiastically, agreeing to meet. I did not inform Dwight. I did not request company permission. I was off the clock, operating entirely within my rights as a free private citizen. On Friday afternoon, I met Tanya at a quiet coffee shop downtown. She was sharp, ambitious, and deeply knowledgeable about international trade law, but like many brilliant young entrepreneurs, she lacked practical experience in acquiring major corporate clients. The biggest challenge new compliance firms face, Tanya explained, adjusting her glasses, is building immediate trust with risk-averse corporate executives. They default to massive, expensive logistics agencies because they are afraid of taking a chance on an independent consultant. I took a slow sip of my coffee and looked at her intently. Let me share something 15 years in this industry has taught me, Tanya, I said. Corporate executives do not buy brand names, they buy peace of mind. When you approach manufacturing firms, do not lead with technical tariff codes. Lead with risk mitigation. Tell them precisely how improper clearance documentation costs them money in demurrage fees, and show them how your dedicated, personalized oversight guarantees zero port delays. I outlined general operational patterns across the regional manufacturing sector, pointing out three mid-sized equipment competitors who were currently suffering shipping delays due to bloated, inefficient logistics vendors. I did not disclose any trade secrets or proprietary data from Apex. I simply taught her how to analyze public customs filings and approach corporate decision-makers with compelling value propositions. Tanya took detailed notes, her eyes shining with excitement. Grant, this insight is absolute gold. Thank you so much. On Tuesday, I met Sabine for lunch at an outdoor bistro. We discussed the evolving landscape of international heavy machinery exports. Many regional manufacturing firms are expanding into European and Asian markets, Sabine noted, but their executive leadership teams completely fail to grasp cultural negotiation protocols. They lose major contracts simply because their representatives sound aggressive or tone-deaf. That is your primary competitive edge, Sabine, I told her. Position your independent advisory firm not as a translation service, but as a strategic international deal preservation agency. Competitors in our sector are losing million-dollar contracts because they rely on generic translation agencies who do not understand technical heavy engineering or cultural nuances. I shared general insights into how corporate procurement officers evaluate third-party consultants, and how she could pitch her services directly to executive boards seeking to expand their overseas market footprint. On Wednesday evening, I had dinner with Norman at a classic steakhouse. Over dinner, Norman listened attentively as I recounted the full sequence of events regarding Dwight's broken promise, Gage's appointment, and the toxic workplace dynamic at Apex. Norman shook his head slowly, his expression grim. Dwight Miller is a short-sighted fool, Grant. He traded 15 years of proven operational excellence and absolute integrity for family favoritism. He has no idea that you are the sole reason that division functions. I appreciate your kind words, Norman, I said. Moving forward, I am focusing my energy on broader strategic consulting. The industrial manufacturing sector is riddled with operational blind spots. Companies focus entirely on internal production metrics while completely ignoring the human networks that sustain their supply chains. Norman smiled warmly, setting down his glass of wine. Grant, you have a master-level understanding of supply chain relationship dynamics. The major mining and infrastructure firms I consult for desperately need that exact expertise. Over the following 2 months, I maintained absolute professional discipline at Apex Heavy Manufacturing. I arrived at 6 in the morning executed my designated job responsibilities with cold precision, and left at 5 in the afternoon. But I completely ceased performing uncompensated, high-level crisis management duties that fell outside my formal job description. When minor operational hiccups occurred, I no longer spent my evenings making personal phone calls to smooth things over. I filed standard internal reports and passed them directly to Gage's desk, exactly as company protocol dictated. Meanwhile, the external seeds I had planted began to yield extraordinary results. Tanya officially launched her independent customs consultancy. Leveraging the client acquisition strategies I had shared with her, she approached 3 of Apex's primary regional manufacturing competitors. Impressed by her sharp regulatory expertise and personalized service, all 3 competitors hired her firm immediately to oversee their port compliance operations. Because Tanya's new corporate clients paid premium retainer fees for priority service, Nadia's port compliance team naturally dedicated their primary attention to clearing those shipments efficiently. When Apex's containers arrived at the harbor, they were placed in standard, routine processing queues. Without my intervention to resolve minor documentation discrepancies, Apex's shipments began experiencing routine 3-day clearance delays. Demurrage fees started accumulating rapidly and delivery timelines slipped. Concurrently, Sabine expanded her independent cultural consulting firm. She approached 2 major international procurement groups that had previously contracted with Apex. She presented a compelling case for her strategic deal preservation services. Recognizing her immense value, those international buyers retained Sabine exclusively for their heavy equipment supply negotiations. When Gage attempted to negotiate a new $20 million component supply contract with an Asian manufacturing consortium, he acted with his typical arrogant condescension. Without Sabine present to bridge the cultural rift and guide the negotiation, the Asian consortium abruptly terminated discussions and signed a long-term supply agreement with one of our chief regional competitors instead. Finally, Norman conducted his annual strategic vendor reviews for the major mining conglomerates he advised. When those corporate boards asked for his expert evaluation of regional drive system suppliers, Norman provided an unvarnished assessment. He noted that Apex Heavy Manufacturing had suffered a severe decline in operational leadership stability and client relationship management, while rival regional manufacturers had dramatically upgraded their compliance efficiency and cultural negotiation capabilities. Within 90 days, 3 of Apex's largest corporate accounts, representing nearly 40% of our division's annual revenue, notified our board that they were transitioning their primary supply contracts to our competitors upon contract expiration. The unraveling of Dwight Miller's operational division was swift, spectacular, and utterly unstoppable. By month 5 of Gage's tenure as Senior Operations Director, the division was in absolute chaos. Port demurrage penalties had surpassed $150,000. Shipping schedules were delayed by an average of 3 weeks across all product lines. International client satisfaction scores had plummeted to an all-time low, and the loss of 3 major corporate accounts wiped out millions in projected quarterly profits. Dwight was in a state of unmitigated panic. He spent his days pacing the hallways, screaming at junior staff, and demanding daily emergency status reports. Gage looked terrified, locking himself in his executive office for hours while ignoring mounting piles of urgent operational files. One Tuesday morning, Dwight burst into my cubicle, his face red and blotchy, his hands trembling. "Grant, what on earth is happening to this department?" Dwight shouted, slamming a stack of quarterly loss reports onto my desk. "Our port clearances are stalled. European buyers are refusing to renew contracts. Our top 3 accounts just walked away. Why haven't you fixed this?" I looked up from my computer monitor, my expression completely serene, my tone calm and professional. "I am operating strictly within the boundaries of my assigned job description." "Dwight," I replied smoothly. "As Senior Operations Manager, my designated duties are inventory tracking and internal production scheduling, strategic client retention, international negotiations, and port authority management fall directly under the purview of the Senior Operations Director." Dwight gasped, staring at me in disbelief. But you used to handle all of those relationships. You know the port inspector. You know the translator. You know Norman. Call them right now and make them fix this. I shook my head slowly. I am afraid I cannot do that, Dwight. Those individuals are independent external professionals and regulatory officials. They do not report to Apex Heavy Manufacturing. Furthermore, when you informed me 5 months ago that I was far too valuable in my current role to be promoted, I took your words to heart. I focused entirely on my assigned duties and ceased interfering in senior executive responsibilities. Dwight stood frozen, the harsh reality finally dawning upon him. He realized that in his greedy rush to elevate his incompetent nephew, he had severed the invisible thread of personal trust and expertise that held his entire corporate empire together. He had assumed that my 15 years of hard-won external relationships belonged to the company. He learned the hard way that loyalty and trust belong to the individual, not the corporate title. 3 weeks later, the corporate board of directors at Apex corporate headquarters intervened. Spurred by catastrophic financial losses and mounting client complaints, an executive audit committee descended upon our facility. They conducted an exhaustive, unsparing investigation into our operational metrics, contract cancellations, and personnel decisions over the preceding 6 months. The board's findings were brutal. They uncovered Dwight's blatant act of nepotism, Gage's gross operational negligence, and the catastrophic loss of major client accounts directly resulting from managerial incompetence. The corporate board acted swiftly. Dwight Miller was stripped of his executive vice president title and demoted to a junior administrative manager role in a windowless basement office, tasked with archiving old paper records at a fraction of his former salary. Gage was summarily terminated from the company, his brief and disastrous corporate career ending in complete disgrace. The following morning, I received a formal summons to the executive boardroom on the top floor. Sitting at the head of the conference table was Regina, the newly appointed Senior Vice President of Corporate Restructuring. She was a sharp, formidable executive who had been brought in from corporate headquarters to stabilize the division. Regina motioned for me to take a seat, opening a thick binder containing my 15-year employment record. "Grant," she began, speaking with direct, transparent respect. "Our internal audit team has completed a thorough review of this division's operations over the past decade. It is abundantly clear to the board that you were the true operational backbone of this entire enterprise. Dwight Miller's decision to pass you over for promotion was a catastrophic error of judgment driven by blatant favoritism." I remained silent, listening attentively. On behalf of executive leadership, Regina continued, "I want to offer you an official apology. More importantly, I am authorized by the board to offer you the position of Executive Director of Global Operations, effective immediately. The position includes a base salary of $220,000, more than double your current earnings, alongside executive stock options, full operational authority, and a substantial signing bonus. We want you to rebuild this division and restore our market leadership." I looked at Regina. 6 months ago, that offer would have been the fulfillment of my professional dreams. It was everything I had worked 15 years to achieve. However, over the past 5 months, I had discovered something far more valuable than a corporate title. I had discovered the true measure of my own independent worth. "I appreciate the board's generous offer, Regina," I said softly, "but I must respectfully decline." Regina blinked in genuine astonishment. "Decline? Grant, this is the highest operational role in the company. Why would you walk away now?" "Because last Friday was my final official day at Apex Heavy Manufacturing," I replied, handing her my formal letter of resignation. "Over the past several months, I have finalized the establishment of my own independent supply chain advisory firm, Vance Strategic Logistics." Regina stared at the resignation letter, her executive composure visibly cracking. "Grant, we need your expertise. What about our client relationships? What about our port operations?" "My firm has already been retained by 3 major industrial conglomerates," I explained calmly. "Specifically, the 3 former clients who recently departed Apex. They reached out to me directly, recognizing that the operational reliability and strategic trust they valued for 15 years were tied to my personal leadership, not this corporate logo. Furthermore, Vance Strategic Logistics has formed an exclusive strategic alliance with Tanya's compliance firm, Sabine's International Advisory Group, and Norman's Consulting Network. Regina's face turned pale as the complete strategic checkmate became clear to her. "You cannot do this," she said, her voice dropping. "Corporate legal could evaluate non-compete violations or trade secret litigation." I smiled gently, leaning forward. "You are welcome to have corporate legal review my personnel file, Regina." Because Dwight Miller insisted on keeping me classified as a mid-level manager to avoid paying me executive compensation, I never signed a non-compete clause, a non-solicitation agreement, or an executive restrictive covenant. I have complied meticulously with all federal trade secret laws. I did not take a single document or proprietary file from Apex. I simply took my own experience, my knowledge, and my personal professional reputation. Regina sat back in her chair, completely speechless. I stood up, buttoned my suit jacket, and offered her a warm, professional handshake. "Dwight Miller once told me that business needs evolve and plans change," I said quietly. He was entirely correct. Plans do change. The difference is that I adapted in a way that secured my own future, rather than sacrificing my life for someone else's broken promise. I walked out of that corporate skyscraper for the final time, stepping into the crisp morning air. The sun was rising bright over the city skyline. Today, Vance Strategic Logistics generates more revenue in a single quarter than Apex Heavy Manufacturing ever paid me in 2 years. I manage my own schedule, select my own corporate partners, and advise industrial leaders who deeply respect and value true operational expertise. Dwight Miller remains trapped at his basement desk, filing paper archives while watching his former corporate clients thrive under my independent leadership. Gage is out of the industry entirely, learning the hard lesson that an executive title without competence is meaningless. To everyone listening today, if you are currently stuck in a toxic corporate environment where your loyalty is exploited, your achievements are ignored, or your earned promotions are handed to underqualified favorites, remember this fundamental truth. Your true value does not reside in a corporate job title or an organization chart. It resides in your expertise, your integrity, and the human relationships you build along the way. Know your worth, stand firm in your competence, and never be afraid to step away from someone else's broken system to build your own legacy. Thank you for spending your time with me today. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button, leave a comment sharing your own workplace experiences, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of resilience and strategic success. Stand tall, value your skills, and never let anyone undermine your worth.